it, have you? Well done. Well, here we all are, and without further ado, because there's lots to get through, here's somebody who's been doing your homework for you. So let's go straight over to Richard Hudson Evans.
Hello. What do you think it's going to be like walking into a shop and asking for a CB set? Do you reckon it's going to be easy? Or perhaps, like me, you know nothing about the technical hardware side of it and imagine it to be something like this.
Can I help you, sir?
Yes, I'd like to see your CB equipment.
This way, sir. Were you after an oscillating power with frequency gain limiters, or the more complicated and, of course, highly sought-after doppelganger with horizontal and vertical polarization and a 3-element beam offering 12 dB, or the 2-phi element offering 17 dB, equivalent to putting 200 watts into a basic quarter-wave mask?
Oh, I think I'll come back later. For most converts, CB, the Citizens Band, will be a whole new world. During the British prohibition of CB, it surrounded itself in its own folklore. Its peculiar jargon is, it would seem, designed to confuse the outsider, the unconverted. Traditionally, of course, CB used to be an exclusive under-the-counter game enjoyed by pirates of the airwaves, the law-breaking breakers. Well now, thankfully for the rest of us, the dear old Home Office has taken the brakes off breaking and anyone can join in. And they have. The nation's high street shelves, the garage accessory counters, all the car radio centres are brimming over with CB temptation. For a mere novice exploring this CB jungle, the mind can all too easily boggle, while the pitfalls are plentiful.
Good afternoon, sir. You're interested in CB?
Yes, I am, but frankly I haven't a clue what's involved. Guide me.
Well, firstly, do you have a licence?
No.
Well, officially, you need one. The Home Office Wireless Telegraphy Act of 1949 says so. A CB rig, apart from being a receiver, of course, is also a transmitter, and transmitter users must have a licence. In any case, the £400 fine and/or 3 months imprisonment, a sizable enough deterrence to ensure that you hand over the necessary £10 to the post office to be truly legal. The rig itself, and your first and biggest decision. Do you want a mobile rig, one in the car that is, or a base station, one to use at home? Mobiles cost from around £60 for a very cheap set. For a decent one, they'll be prepared to have to spend around £90, up to about £120 for a sophisticated rig. Base stations go from, say, £90 up to a couple of £100. Some, of course, will get both. Anyway, assuming you're in the mass market for a mobile, apart from the price you pay, what's the difference between the various rigs?
The difference is basic gadgetry, that one does not outperform the other by the wattage. They are both identical, but you get extra features. Let's look at the first one, which is the basic system. You would expect to find an on-off volume control, a channel selector, which is a 40-channel channel selector, and a squelch control.
A squelch control? Well, I warned you, the mind might boggle. The knob marked squelch is basically a way of filtering out any background noise, which could be static or interference from distant CBers, so that you only receive intelligible signals. You turn the squelch knob just past the point where the background noise is cut off. Clever stuff. Or squelch. Once you've selected your rig, you've got to select an aerial, and the choice is bewildering. Some may have a coil at the top, several halfway down the rod, and others have their coils at the base. However, officially, only what is called in the trade a base-loaded antenna is legal. So only a base-loaded type. Okay? Good. Now you may ask, why can't I use my existing car radio aerial? After all, an aerial is an aerial, surely, or rather, an antenna is an antenna. And why, therefore, should you have to have two aerials, drilling another hole where one would do? Well, you can run a car radio and a CB rig of the same antenna, if you buy a splitter. A splitter box is simply a filtering device which enables CB signals to be routed to the CB rig and radio broadcast signals to be routed to the car radio. When it comes to transmitting on your CB, the signal is rejected from the car radio circuit. So your transmitted power goes to your one antenna. Sounds like a good idea, but is it?
In practice, the quality of them isn't good enough to make it 100% satisfactory. To get a really good aerial splitter, you'd have to pay something like £25. Unfortunately, they are about £8 or £10, and the quality is not good enough. So, in theory, they're a great idea.
But in practice, they're not, if you want optimum performance from your CB set. And this can be achieved with a second separate aerial. That means a proper CB antenna, and a base-loaded one at that. I wouldn't opt for a splitter if I were you, OK? Now, the rig itself. Obviously, to be legal in the United Kingdom, you must buy a proper FM rather than an illegal AM set. FM, not AM. But how can you tell? Well, legal rigs must carry the CB 2781 marking on the front.
Do not buy a unit that doesn't have that on, because it does not comply with Home Office specifications. Even if it did internally, it means it hasn't been government approved anyway.
Remember, look for CB 2781 on the front of the rig, 27 standing for 27 MHz FM. Also allowed rigs with CB 93481 stamps on them, 934 standing for 934 MHz FM. Also legal. As for where to buy a legal rig, well, that all depends, of course, on whether you intend fitting the equipment yourself or you want to have it fitted.
Well, I would say the answer would be to try and get an all-in package from a car radio specialist, and you've got a year's guarantee. And I know that most CRISP members, the Car Radio Independent Specialist, if you look for that stamp on the window, then you know you're getting an established business that has expert sales, service and installation facilities and works to a good standard.
And so to the fitting. You're about to hear how I had a Radiomobile rig with its own speaker built in and antenna fitted to my car. For those who think they can do it themselves, obviously this will be very useful, while for those who prefer to leave it to others, this at least will give you an idea of what you'll be paying for. Your first decision, where you want the rig fitted.
Right now, shut up, you... Oh, sorry, Richard. Quiet, you lot. I'm having a personal word with Mr. Hudson Evans. Now, it's perfectly obvious to me, Richard, that you need a bit of help at this juncture. I mean, it's a very personal, emotional moment having a CB rig fitted, right? Now, here you are with a boffin-type fella about to operate on your motor. Who knows what he's going to do? Drill holes here, blind you with science there? No. Richard, you and him get on with fitting the rig, and I'll keep an eye on the audience, right? OK? Right, you lot, fitting a rig, commence!
Now, it's got to be somewhere that's accessible mainly for the driver, although if the passenger wants to use it as well, it'll have to be more into the centre.
Not a lot of room on the right there, because obviously I want some room for my knees as well.
Vital. After all, you are not fitting a car around the CB rig, you're in fact fitting a CB rig to a car, the main objective of which is to drive fairly safely.
So I think we probably rule out the driver's side, so how about on the passenger side?
That's where we'll have to walk round to and see.
OK.
All right, stop pushing, just pay attention. They're walking around to the passenger side, nothing unusual about that, won't take too long. Oh, here they are now, they've got there.
How about under the glove box there? It'll fit in, I think. Yeah. Well, we've got a fairly rigid plastic glove box moulding, which will hold it quite nicely.
So we'll drill through the bottom of the glove box.
Yes, and use that to mount the bracket so the rig is immediately below the glove box.
All right, stop pressing forward. Right, you got the picture. They decided to have the rig on the passenger side at the front because Richard's got a funny face here. Nothing personal, Richard. But all cars are different, eh? Now, what's next?
I've taken the bracket off the set. It's just as well to have it on the set whilst offering it up in the first place. I'm just checking that I've got nothing behind. And there might be the fuse box, for instance, possibly the windscreen washer lines, which were only full of water, but you probably wouldn't notice this till you go to use the windscreen washers and then discover the car is gradually filling up with water. In this case, we've got everything well clear behind. So mark into the place we're putting the bracket with a centre punch.
Yeah. And then you know where to drill.
Hope you lot are taking notes, you know where to drill, because this is common sense coming at you here, right? Oh, wait a minute, he's got a drill in his hand.
I'm using a hand drill because a hand drill won't go through the panel with such force as an electric drill will. And the second one.
That's through, okay.
So it's now a case of fixing the bracket. If you're going into plastic, it's probably best to use nuts and bolts.
Oh, pure artistry, 2 holes drilled to perfection, and the bracket's what is going to hold the rig in place is now in place. Looks like a neat job. They attach the rig, and now they're left holding a couple of wires. One blue one red one. Shut up! This is not a cue for a song.
There's very little wiring, in fact. We have a power lead, which in this case is a little 2-pin plug, which will only goes into a socket on the back of the set. The plug and socket will only go in one way round, like so.
Now, your 2 feed wires, black and red, where are you going to couple those to?
The black one is an earth, which you want to have a good metal-to-metal ground.
Where do you suggest in this case?
Well, we should be able to find something under the steering column.
Ah, yes, there. Yeah, that looks... Yeah, okay,
that
okay.
should do.
Clear as mud. Who said that? Now just shut up and listen, then you'll learn something. 2 wires, right? The black one is earth, stops you turning blue, right? And the red one is for power, so the rig can work when you're rubber ducking or whatever you intend to use this beautiful piece of technology for, right? So where do we place the red wire?
The red one is going to be your source of 12 volts. You can either have this on permanently or wired up, as the radio is in this case, so it only comes on with the ignition switch.
Yeah, that's safer, isn't it? It won't flatten the battery that way.
You can't actually leave the car with the set switched on.
So, we attach to where?
Now, the fuse box is usually the easiest point on the car to go to.
The heavens, where's that?
Do you have the owner's handbook for the vehicle around somewhere?
Here we are. The most unread book I have, indeed. Wait a moment.
Right, know what an owner's handbook is? Good, then you'll also know you can never find the bit you want quickly, so talk amongst yourselves while Richard finds the fuse box in... Oh, shut up, he's found it.
Yes, hang on. The fuse box positioned inside the car at the back of the parcel shelf.
Oh, it can't be far away.
Oh, there it is, down there. Yeah.
There we are.
Okay.
Looks like being number 3.
1, 2, 3. This one here.
That's it.
Right, having fitted the red lead to the correct fuse, they now have power. But, and this is important, they have not switched the rig on, because if they did, they'd damage the rig. Because the antenna, aerial to you beginners, is not yet connected. Oh, well, now, the choice of an antenna is a very personal thing. It's so personal that only a man who's about to be fitted is qualified to discuss it, so I'll leave you in the very capable hands of Mr. Hudson Evans, who'll explain what antennae are all about. Now listen carefully!
You could choose a permanent installation, which involves drilling a hole in your motor car. Then there's the clamp type of antenna, which is attached, no holes, to the roof guttering or the boot edge. Or there's the magnetic antenna, which you plonk onto your roof when you want to use your CB, rather like Kojak when he dons his flashing light. Vandal-proof at least, as is an antenna with detachable mast. Good idea. Also, vandal and car wash proof are retractable aerials, of course, but as time goes by, the segments of the mast tend to wear and stick, perhaps, resulting in the aerial being the wrong length. And that's bad, as you'll shortly discover how important it is for your antenna to be the correct length. Now, where to fit the antenna? Remember, with CB, your car's metal bodywork is an integral part of the antenna. The more metal there is around the base of a CB antenna, the better the rig's performance. So that's why the best place for an antenna is in the middle of the roof. It does, however, mean making a hole in your car's roof. And it also means, of course, disturbing the headlining. For most DIY motorists, perhaps, better left undisturbed and undamaged. That's why most people with newish models who want to retain their maximum part exchange value will opt for a wing or boot-mounted antenna. My selection, a clamp-type antenna with no holes to drill, fitted to the boot lid edge. Lots of metal around.
You can either have it on the boot side, or it can in fact go on the front edge of the boot immediately behind the rear window.
Which do you recommend?
If it's anything to centre or left, it's liable to be hit by the trees, of course, going down narrow country lanes, so probably putting it on the offside boot edge is the best place.
That's a good tip.
So the aerial, very simply, slides on to the edge of the boot with a firm press.
And all you're doing now is securing the clamp to the underside of the boot lid edge, I should say, so that the whole the bottom part of the aerial mounting doesn't come adrift.
Correct. These have to be fairly tight because the tips of the screws have to penetrate through the paint and make contact with the metal of the car body.
You say through the paint?
Yes, but this is on the underside of the boot lid, and it's merely 2 minute punctures in the paint. Each puncture is far less than an 1/8 inch diameter.
So now we have to pass the cable through from the boot area in through the back seat inside the car. It's not going to be easy. No, oh, hang on. Is there a hole there?
I think we've got a hole, yes. There are quite often holes in cars between the boot and the cab of the car. It's just a case of trusting to luck that there's enough room to pass the cable through. Yes, we've got it. Success. Pull the cable through, remembering to leave enough slack at the back of the car so that the boot lid can still open and shut quite satisfactorily.
Now, under the carpet then, or what?
Under the carpet, yes. Keep it all well out of harm's way. And it's now a case of simply plugging it in to the back of the set, like so. And there's a locking ring on the plug that has to be done up tight. But that's it. We wind up through the ignition, and the moment of truth, we turn the set on the front panel.
Eureka! We have noise.
The set is lighting up, and plainly the receiver is working. Good.
Now, at this stage, you could be forgiven for thinking that you can start broadcasting. Well, you can't, because the antenna must be matched to the rig. Let me explain why. Radio waves, you see, apparently have a certain length, and an antenna's length must be matched to that of the radio wave. If your antenna is the wrong length, some of the power from your CB transmitter doesn't radiate, and instead it's bounced back into your rig, which could damage it. Can I buy a custom-built, already sorted out and matched antenna rig combination, you ask? Well, yes you can, but if you want optimum performance, then there are no shortcuts to individual tuning. You see, every car is a different shape, so for each installation you need to tune the aerial. You tune it by adjusting its length, and this, believe me, is crucial. On some antennae, you can adjust the length of the rod. On others, you have to cut the mast down. As for what length the aerial should be, this is where you must use, or rather your car radio specialist must use, an SWR meter. SWR standing for Standing Wave Ratio. Now, don't worry, for most it's a job for the experts, but an absolutely essential one. If you do tackle the job yourself, follow the instructions provided with every SWR meter very carefully indeed. And so, back to my antenna tuning.
We've got about 1.25 inches off it, so we'll measure it on channel 1. And channel 1, it's reading 1.3 to 1. So we now go to channel 40. Full on cal, switch to SWR, 1.7 to 1. Quite acceptable. There you are, sir. One fully SWR aerial for you.
So we're now matched, are we?
We're now matched, yes, and you can transmit away to your heart's content.
And so at last, the moment of truth. Out on the road, out with that microphone, and take to the airwaves, making contact with kindred spirits.
Radio base to radio mobile. We've now driven about a mile away. Let's see what it sounds like with two cars a mile apart. Over.
Radio base, this is radio mobile. I'm about 1 mile distance between our two vehicles. About 1 mile away from you, so wondering how you're receiving me. Standing by.
And as you can hear now, there's no drop in quality or power when a couple of FM mobiles are 4 miles apart.
Radio base, this is radio mobile, 4 miles from you. I am 4 miles from you. Wonder how you're reading me. 4 miles out from you. Radio base, this is radio mobile. Please go ahead.
So there I was, rig fitted, rig working. I asked Peter Ratcliffe of Radiomobile just what sort of range can we consumers of legal FM equipment expect?
I would think that in open country one should look for a range, mobile to mobile, of perhaps something like 6 to 12 miles, and in major conurbations such as in the London area, anything from 2 miles to 6 miles would be believable.
Apart from mobile installations, base stations bring CB into the home. Mobiles can then keep in contact with their homes or offices. Householders can contact each other or the corner shop direct. A base station would help the aged and handicapped to keep in touch with the community, and there's no nasty telephone bill. Purpose-built base stations can be bought, or you can, using a 12-volt power supply, convert a mobile rig into a mains-powered base station. However, to comply with government regulations, if a mobile is used as a base station, it must be depowered. Peter Ratcliffe explains why.
Now, we have 40 channels that have been allocated for citizens' band use by the Home Office, and if one has unrestricted range, then 40 transmitters could in fact saturate the United Kingdom. As it is, with the reduction in range, typically the maximum range one can get is going to be something like 15 miles. And if you can visualize little 15-mile circles covering the country on every channel, then there can be, in fact, several thousand conversations taking place on citizens' band at any given point in time.
And depowering a mobile rig is simple with Radiomobile equipment. You just throw a switch on the back. However, a mobile antenna would be unsuitable for a base station.
I would suggest that an aerial installation is carried out by a professional, somebody like the man that would fit your television aerial, and it is rigged up properly on your house, and a proper base station aerial.
How expensive would that be?
Probably somewhere between 20 and 40 pounds for the aerial supply and installation.
And if you're going to tackle it as a do-it-yourself job, where on the house would you fit such an aerial?
In general terms, as high as possible and as far as possible away from the television aerial.
But there's no adjustment of the aerial in the same way that there is on a mobile rig installation?
No, there's not.
Well, you've now heard that with CB you can not only communicate, fun in itself, but you could use it in a number of ways to make your life easier. However, it's quite obviously in everybody's interest, yours and mine, to know about the official code of practice when operating your CB equipment. Now, you'll find a copy of the code on the inside of this cassette's cover. Code of practice. Sounds very official, doesn't it? Well, you know, it isn't when you hear Dave Lee Travis and Richard Nichols decoding the code of practice. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Richard. Now let's take a look at the code of practice. Code 1, how to operate. Listen before you transmit.
Well, otherwise you're just going to walk all over whoever is already having a conversation.
Does that make you a sidebander?
No, it makes you a goon.
A goon?
Yeah.
I see. Number 2 is keep conversations short.
But it does make sense not to hog the channels all the time. You know, you might well feel that you want to deliver war and peace on the air, but probably not very many people want to listen to you, and you will find that they have formed the silent majority without you.
Right. Number 3 actually is a follow-up to number 2, because in fact it says keep each transmission short, listen often for reply, or you may find the station you are talking to has moved out of range.
The person at the other end can't actually see you. So when you have finished speaking, he doesn't know whether you have gone out of range, died, or are simply waiting for an answer. So it's polite to tell him in one of the accepted come on, come back forms that you would like him to answer at this particular moment. Otherwise you'll sit there in total silence waiting for something to happen.
Now, you said come on, come back. Those are 2 Americanisms. And it brings us very neatly to number 5, because it says simply CB slang, which refers, of course, to the Americanisms, is not necessary. Plain language is just as effective. Now then, number 6, be patient with newcomers and help them.
This is fairly obvious, isn't it? It's the same with learner drivers. You don't try and kill them, you try and keep out of their way. And give them as much room as possible. On the air, people who aren't familiar with the set are going to need some help to begin with.
7 and 8, emergency and assistance. Channel 9, which is now accepted as the emergency channel, should at all time be given priority by anybody who hears a call on Channel 9.
It is not on to start talking about the weather on Channel 9. You use it only if there is an emergency, and you leave it clear for that.
This little white paper in front of me does seem to follow on in a logical order. If there's no answer on Channel 9 for help, if you need help, then you would obviously move to Channel 14 or 19, which are the accepted breaker channels. But if you hear a call for help, you don't dive in straight away. Rather wait, and then if a regular volunteer service or the police or whatever have not taken up this message, then you should move in and try and help. Number 11 is a statement of fact. There is no official organisation for monitoring CB and no guarantee that you'll always be in reach of a volunteer monitor. CB is not a substitute for the 999 service and as such should be respected. Number 12 on here really is telling people to take note of a certain few numbers of channels that are very important and respect the conventions of those channels. Channel 9 is for only emergencies and assistance. Channel 14, which is the calling channel, once you've established a contact, move to another channel and hold a conversation, which is obviously sensible to clear that channel ready for any other breakers. Channel 19 for conversations among travellers on main roads, which I assume can be cars or trucks.
Channel 19 tends to be used for traffic information about main trunk routes.
The last two sections refer to safety and interference. Safety simply says use common sense when using CB, do not transmit when it could be risky to do so, and it gives a few for instances. Do you want to touch on those?
It's a fact that you can create a small spark with your transmit button, and you don't really want to blow yourself up, so leave it alone. Switch it off, preferably in a petrol station.
It touches in paragraph B on not using it when the microphone may interfere with your ability to drive safely.
If something develops in front of you, an emergency, don't bother explaining. Drop the microphone and get on with your driving. Or if you've got time, if it's not actually an emergency, then by all means just say traffic.
And interference, finally. Interference can be caused by any form of radio transmission. Avoid the risks. Put your antenna as far away as possible from others. And remember, you're not allowed to use power amplifiers. In the unlikely event that your CB causes interference, moving the set or antenna a few feet may well cure the problem.
The nearer your radio set is to another one, the more likely it is to interfere. You've probably had a taxi outside your house dropping somebody down the road, and he's called up on the radio and said, all right, I'm clear at that one, where shall I go next? And he's walked all over blankety blank at a critical moment.
Is there a critical moment in blankety blank?
They're nearly all critical, aren't they? But that's just proximity. That's just because it's close enough and strong enough to override the television or your FM radio that you're listening to your local music station on.
Is there anything that you think may be lacking from that code of practice that you would have put in had you been working on the paper?
There's nothing glaringly missing from it, and there's nothing glaringly wrong with it either. On the whole, I think perhaps it's one of the best things the government have done about CB in the past 5 years.
So if our CBers all take a good note of that code of practice, they're not going to go far wrong.
Well, it's like everything else. Rules are made for the obedience of fools and the guidance of wise men, and this is for guidance. If you read this and understand it, you will know why it has been written this way and why these decisions have been made, and you'll agree with it anyway. And as long as you're not a lame brain, you won't go wrong.
Well, there you go, Breakers. That's just about it for us. I hope you've enjoyed listening to both sides of this tape, and we hope that it's instilled you with more and more confidence to get out there and do what CB is all about. Make contact and do it in any way you wish to do it at all. I'm not going to say I'm down, I'm gone or anything like that. I would give you a 10:36, but my watch got broke during this recording session. Meanwhile, I wish you all good CBing. Take care on the roads, you hear?